Good evening to all of you. Welcome to today's ACS Science Talk. I, Ajay Jha, on behalf of ACS India team, welcome you again. So just to update you on the upcoming ACS Science Talks, please visit our ACS India webpage and register for these sessions and enjoy. We have also updated the past lecture recordings of the sessions in the ACS Science Talks virtual library sections. So enjoy scrolling them, like them, and share into the scientific community. To keep you updated with the upcoming cutting edge scientific research, product launches, and programs at ACS, we have monthly newsletter at ACS Insights India. So subscribe it today for free using this QR code. Enjoy reading. Now moving on to the scientific session, I would request Dr. Diksha Gupta, Associate Director, ACS India, to introduce our today's speaker, Professor Bryan Brooks, and start the session. Over to Dr. Diksha Gupta.
Thank you so much, Ajay. I'm so pleased to welcome Professor Bryan Brooks today for ACS Science Talk. Hello, everyone. So there is a lot to share about, but I'll have a very brief introduction, though he does not need, but as a formality of the session. Professor Bryan Brooks received his BS and MS in Biological Science from University of Mississippi and his PhD in Environmental Science from the University of North Texas. He is Distinguished Professor of Environmental Science and Biomedical Studies at Baylor University. He coordinates the Global Horizon Scanning Project, which identifies priority research questions necessary to achieve sustainable environmental quality around the world, and is principal investigator on the Center for Disease Control and Prevention's Uncover EH initiative, which identifies challenges and research needs for environmental health in the United States. He routinely works internationally on water quality, environmental contaminants, and sustainability issues, particularly related to rapidly urbanizing regions on 5 continents. He is a recipient of several awards and honors, to name a few: Past President's Award, National Environmental Health Association, 2018 Farm International Environmental Award, 2016 Leadership Award, Water Environment Federation, and many more. Currently, he serves as the editor-in-chief of the reputed ACS journal, Environmental Science and Technology Letters. With this brief introduction, I invite Professor Brooks for delivering his scientific.
Well, thank you very much for the kind introduction. I will share my slides and then we will start. Again, my honor to be here with you today. And so what we'll do to get started is we'll actually chat a little bit about the journal, Environmental Science and Technology Letters, and we'll transition into my presentation. You know, ES&T Letters, I think, is an exciting and a very unique publication venue in obviously the environmental science and technology space. Our tagline is what we aim to do, which is provide the fastest time to publication of really urgent and timely research in the environmental field, and we're doing so. So our time to first decision is fast, but we are maintaining with the help of reviewers, hopefully some of you, and our editorial team of that high quality peer review process that you expect from ACS journals. As was mentioned, I'm Bryan Brooks, and so I don't need to talk much more about myself, but we have a wonderful editorial team with different expertise. Each of our associate editors listed here are really world leaders in their fields. And so this is from chemistry to engineering to microbiology, you know, with focuses on things like air and water and analytical chemistry. Really an outstanding group of associate editors. And so I encourage you, perhaps if you're interested in the broader aspects of the fields, just examining their work may be of interest to you, along with our editorial board members. We have 51 editorial advisory board members from around the world. Again, this has a diversity of expertise represented and really incredible expertise. We're so grateful for our EAB members because oftentimes they're certainly a critical part of the engine that makes us achieve our aim, which is actually being realized again, the fastest time to publication of urgent research in the environmental field. So the journal is still relatively new. It was founded in 2014. Obviously, American Chemical Society, this is a nonprofit. It's the largest global science society. And really within the space that we work, it is the leading global journal in the field. And so the subject areas, this is a very important consideration before you submit a paper to a journal, whether it be ours or anyone else's. You know, the subject areas and scope is really the first question. And oftentimes I'm looking at, hey, what am I even citing in my papers? What about the editorial board members' expertise? These are really good questions to ask to think about whether or not your paper may be within the scope. And so atmospheric chemistry, air quality, certainly a major part of our journal. Contaminants in aquatic and terrestrial environments, also long-standing within this journal, as well as ecotoxicology, public health, and treatment and resource recovery. Energy and climate also has been a very common area. Now, in the last year, we've added several different new areas in terms of scope: biogeochemical cycling, data science, and sustainable systems. So these additional subject areas are intended to be able to be inclusive of the diverse topics that perhaps you may be interested in communicating to others around the world. So we have different types of manuscripts. Again, ES&T letters, our hallmark is the letter format. And so this is the typical research article, but these are, again, we're focusing on really timely, urgent contributions. And that's why we prioritize topics for letters in shorter manuscript formats. So a 3,000 word limit for the letters. Now, then we also have brief reviews. These must be critical reviews. They can't just be a basic literature review, and they must also engage topics that are really timely or emerging. I'll provide an example of one of each of these in a minute. And then also in 2020, we launched a new article type called Global Perspectives. And so these are very synthetic articles that are engaging topics that are relevant to us no matter where we live around the world. As an example of letters, this is one that has just come out earlier this year. And it actually creates a real challenge. We know that plastic is such a problem around the world, yet large plastic dumps are creating biodiversity hotspots on deep sea floors. Wow. So we have a problem that may be creating a habitat, yet we don't understand the implications yet for the organisms that are actually taking advantage of this new environmental complexity. Very unique, very interesting topic. Here's an example of a brief review that was published last year. As you know, the COVID-19 global pandemic has caused challenges for all of us. And so as part of our treatment, oftentimes compounds like quaternary ammonia substances are used in cleaning products. But what are the implications of the increased use of those types of cleaning products for the environment and even for people that may come in contact with them? An example of a recent brief review: timely, urgent, necessary. Global perspectives. Per and polyfluoroalkyl substances are getting so much attention, and for good reason. They're persistent. They present risk to people, to ecosystems. And so this global perspective article, I encourage you to check out. Each of these articles is made available free and open access for anyone to be able to read. It really provides synthesis and critiques of the scientific literature and then provides some recommendations, perhaps even for management and even policymakers to consider. These global perspective articles come with videos, and so these are videos from the authors, and they can tell you in their own words a bit more. So not just a visual abstract, but even a recording video abstract of sorts for the global perspectives. The journal, though it was started in 2014, is moving fast. and flying high. And so impact factor is one indicator. It's not the only, but it is one indicator, and certainly that's going up, along with our citations and our article usage. So we know that people are reading and using and even incorporating and citing articles from ES&T letters in their research increasingly each year. You know, one of the things that I'm most proud about is that we partner with environmental science and technology to provide awards to the community each year. And so we have here our Morgan Early Career Award, which is given out every year, and it rotates around the world. This year it happened to be in North America, and you can see the 4 winners that came forward. There's some that from the past, and so be looking for communication from us. Nominate outstanding young scientists and engineers for the Morgan Award when it actually comes to the Asia Pacific region. We also have a brand new award. This is really a new environmental prize for outstanding achievements. It also rotates around the world in different regions each year. This year, we see teachers that are really luminaries in environmental science in China that have been recognized with the award. Professor Zhang and Professor Chao, both really involved with some long and impactful research to try to improve human health and the environment. We recognize the best research papers each year as well in the journal. And so these might be very nice issues and editorials for you to check out if you'd like to get a bit of a summary, at least of some of the editor's thoughts on some of the more impactful research from the previous year. And we also recognize our reviewers. In fact, be looking for the next issue of ES&T Letters, which highlights our awards from 2020. Really grateful for the work of reviewers. We encourage you to become a reviewer for us. It's a gateway into the editorial process. It gives you a better understanding of how we actually must be critical to examine the papers that are submitted, because we all are part of a community of scholars that are trying to improve and advance more sustainable practices for the benefit of people and the environment around the world. We also have virtual issues. And so here's just a couple of virtual issues that are already published, one related to sustainability, one obviously that is quite timely and relevant, looking at, the coronavirus pandemic, the chemistry, the interfaces with biology and engineered systems. A number of topics really are appearing, everything from the fate of this virus in water and wastewater to how long it sticks around on surfaces, the effectiveness of different types of personal protective equipment, to how things like lockdowns has influenced energy, water, other types of systems that matter to all of us. And it probably is not surprising that since our journal is focusing on high quality work that is really timely and urgent, that it oftentimes gets picked up by the popular press. And here's just some examples from air quality to microfibers and microplastics to PFAS, and even, as I was mentioning, microplastics or these deep sea plastic dumps. This is not our goal. Our goal is to disseminate high quality, urgent contributions so that the scientific community and broader management decision makers can benefit from it. But it's not too surprising that we see the work that we publish end up in broader media outlets. So that's a bit of an introduction to ES&T Letters. I do hope that you'll check out the journal. I have been just honored to be able to be in a leadership position with ES&T Letters, to work with such an outstanding international team of editors and editorial advisory board members as we move forward. So now what we're going to do is we're going to transition to the sort of the science talk of my presentation, and then we'll have a lot of time for question and answers at the end of the presentation. You know, oftentimes I give scientific presentations and I'm talking about the actual work that we do in our laboratory. We tend to be fairly multidisciplinary, so you know, we use diverse instruments like targeted and non-targeted analytical methods for examination of contaminants through to transcriptomic, proteomic, epigenomic types of tools. We're asking questions oftentimes about how water contamination or treatment can actually cause implications for public health and ecosystems, and how ultimately to better manage those systems. But today I want to take a different approach. We all work really hard. We tend to focus on the areas that are interesting to us. And we, I think, find so much value in especially environmental science, engineering, health disciplines, because this work, we recognize that it matters to our friends, our neighbors, our family members. But what we probably don't do enough, in my opinion, is think about, just step back and think about the broader landscape. And what we do even less is do that with other people. We don't think together enough. Maybe we have a workshop, maybe we engage each other at a scientific conference, but the capacity that we have just at one university is dwarfed by the capacity at an individual country level. But then think about all of the expertise around the world, whether it be in India or the UK or the United States or Australia or wherever. We tend to have so much capacity, yet we don't have forums. We don't have mechanisms to be able to think together often enough. And so over the next few minutes, I'm going to go through some exercises that we've been undertaking to try to help scientists and engineers think together, to be able to identify some strategic areas that we can focus our attention as we go forward. Now, you're probably familiar with United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I think these are noble goals. There are 17 goals, but they're interconnected, and the connections among them become very, very important. These are noble goals that we are striving toward as nations around the world. But at the same time, if we think about those connections, things like food, energy, and water are becoming more tightly connected. The food, energy, water nexus thus emerges because the interdependence of one resource is increasingly linked to the others. So these are noble goals, the global goals that we're striving to achieve and realize. Yet what we have are grand challenges. We have things like pollution, as noted by the Lancet Commission on Pollution and Health, as a great and a growing global problem. The disease burden of contaminated air and water are just profound. So we have noble goals, but we have big challenges. We also find from the recent IPBES report that biodiversity, the diversity of species between species and ecosystems, is declining faster now than any other time in human history. So we have wonderful, noble goals, but we have major challenges related to public health and the environment. And so we launched, working with the Society of Environmental Toxicology and Chemistry and the American Chemical Society in North America, the Global Horizon Scanning Project. And what this aims to do is, as I was mentioning earlier, work together, think together to identify timely and important environmental quality research needs. So our goal here is not to try to steal anyone's idea, right? We're not trying to take something from someone. More closely, we're trying to think together to say, if we were able to identify topics for strategic research investment, let's say by a government or a foundation or even a business consortium, what would those questions be that if we were able to answer them, we could actually move forward, really accelerate toward more sustainable environmental quality over a 10-year period. So the approach that we took really follows from some methods in social science that have been applied in sectors such as conservation biology by Bill Sutherland and colleagues at Cambridge and other disciplines. But horizon scanning is inherently a public health approach. It is a forward-looking activity because most of the time, especially in environmental issues, we tend to respond, right? We tend to react when the fire starts burning, when the chemical spill happens, when the new contaminant or disease association is identified. And so here we're looking forward and we're thinking together. And we did so in a global manner that was transparent. So this wasn't just 3 or 4 people getting together and coming up with ideas. This was truly a transparent and global activity that was inclusive of multiple disciplines and also multiple sectors. So not just the academics, but also government scientists and industry. And so as we think about the process, we ask people simply, again, following some social science techniques around the world, what were some of the key questions that they thought that we need to be answering? And then after we heard from thousands of people around the world, we essentially have workshops, again, following some previously published methods to synthesize that information, again, with people from different disciplines, from different sectors. And so here are the locations of the workshops we facilitated in different locations based upon the input we received from those different questions. Each workshop was not chaired by me. I'm not the expert on environmental issues in Africa or in Europe or perhaps even in India. But the point is that we had people from the region thinking together, and they also represented different sectors. And again, were inclusive of disciplines. Overall, 149 research questions were identified. Now, I don't think that I have enough time today to go through all 149 questions, but what I might do is spend a few minutes just thinking with you about some of the overarching themes that we actually observed during the project. You know, global megatrends are reshaping the face of the planet. It doesn't really matter who's in government in one place or the other. These global megatrends continue to move forward. Demographic transition to cities and urbanization is certainly a global megatrend. We see a number of research questions throughout the Global Horizon Scanning project that examine essentially this intersection with megatrends that are reshaping the way that we go about life on Earth. And the concentration of chemical use in cities is one of those topics. More people live in cities now than ever before. And a question like this, you know, the ecological and human exposome really is becoming more and more complex and more pronounced in cities. Obviously, more people live in cities now than ever before. And we know that by 2050, 70% of all people will live in urban areas. If we just look at the Asia Pacific region, you know, over 20 megacities will emerge by 2030. So we're concentrating resources like food, energy, and water in cities in terms of their use, which creates tremendous opportunities for smarter cities to be efficient, to be able to design, to implement technologies that actually sustain human populations and protect the natural world. But we're also seeing a concentration of chemical consumption in those cities. So this is creating some challenges. I want to just give an example of some of the work we've been doing in Hong Kong. On the left side of the screen is a picture of Hong Kong looking northward, and what I call sewer sheds, or different parts of Hong Kong where sewage is collected and then taken to a central location. On the right side is a large landfill where I'm looking toward the coastline on top of an earthen berm, and then behind me is one of the largest active landfills in all of Asia. And so I'm just zooming in again, looking at the coastline where the solid waste is being brought into this landfill. And so Hong Kong does have some capacity in place. They have liners in their landfill, so when the rain comes in, they capture their leachate, and they can actually treat it through a wastewater treatment plant that then it gets discharged into the coastline. Now, there's still some challenges with the leachate that's being discharged, but this is much improved relative to many parts of the world. And so what we see is that in that leachate, some antibiotics are being discharged. So these are antibiotics that are coming from expired and discarded medications that are being sent out with solid waste to the landfill, but they're not breaking down fast enough such that we're actually seeing levels of antibiotics entering the coastline at this location that are exceeding some proposed thresholds that would trigger the development of antibiotic resistance. These are the same types of numeric values of antibiotics in water that a number of countries are examining right now for new water quality guidelines to protect water quality. And it may not be surprising then that we also see themes like this found throughout the Global Horizon Scanning Project that underline the inherent connections among human health, ecosystems, and environmental quality. And so this really is somewhat of a One Health type of a concept. We must understand what environmental factors, whether they be anthropogenic or naturally occurring, lead to antibiotic resistance. What has been called one of the largest threats to global health by the World Health Organization really needs more engagement by environmental science and engineering and public health. And for example, if we just were to look at one of those antibiotics we observed exceeding the threshold that's been proposed for erythromycin, in Asia, this predicted no effect concentration is exceeding that threshold 33% of the time in the effluent discharges of Asia. Let's go back to Hong Kong for just a second. And again, as I was mentioning, we're looking toward the coastline. This is where the solid waste is being brought in. And this is also directly where the leachate from the landfill that has went through a wastewater treatment plant is being introduced to the coastline. So solid waste, waste treatment, discharge of effluent discharge to a coastline. It was a bit of a cloudy day, and I was taking a picture, and I saw a lot of things were floating on the edge of the water, and I asked what these were, and they said that these is where they grow oysters. And so, in fact, one of my former students examined these oysters and also some mussels from other parts of the city for a variety of contaminants, which are present. And so this is this nexus of urbanization and waste and food and water that becomes very complex, but is also, I think, a microcosm of the kinds of challenges that we're facing in many places around the world, and again, will continue to face as we go forward. In fact, we see, again, global megatrends, and the food, energy, water nexus represents a global megatrend, illustrated throughout the Global Horizon Scanning Project. We know that aquaculture has now surpassed global fisheries in terms of production of fish for human consumption. We need to increase our aquaculture capabilities because, according to the United Nations, a 200% increase in food production is estimated by 2050 in low and middle income countries. And aquaculture, sometimes called the Blue Revolution, is going to be really important. Somewhere between 50 to 80% of global sewage is estimated to go untreated. And this presents challenges because if we want to take and embrace a one water-based approach, we really need to recycle, we need to recover waste, we need to develop and implement innovative technologies to achieve these goals where we don't look at waste as a waste, but waste as a resource. And in doing so, we can sustain the quality of our food products that are being developed in aquaculture, whether those be in inland situations or in coastal systems with net pen operations. A number of questions directly related to environmental engineering science and actually are related to some of the comments I was just making. We need solution-based approaches. If think about the diverse water challenges around the world. Again, it's estimated that 2/3 of the global population will live in water-stressed regions just by 2025. And as we know, India is certainly a burgeoning country with many water challenges as well. So how can we make sure that the drinking water for human consumption that we derive from what we might consider marginal sources? Certainly groundwater depletion is a major issue. In regions now, we're focusing on brackish groundwater in certain aquifers as opportunities for beneficial reuse. But we also see eutrophication of lakes and rivers that sometimes lead to the development of taste and odor issues, or even of more concern, harmful algal blooms. And so we really have to think through this interface between the chemistry and the biology and the engineering disciplines to be able to manage waste and recover resources to protect, and while we protect human health and the environment. And again, water reuse, just an example, we're seeing these types of themes around the world. I mentioned harmful algal blooms. It's also a topic that illustrates these connections among human health and ecosystems and environmental quality, and also a common theme in the Global Horizon Scanning Project. Harmful algal toxins present emerging threats in some regions, and in some cases, and sometimes they actually present the greatest threat to public health and ecosystems in terms of water quality. There's a lot of needs here. This is actually an area in which we work as well, and think about the intersections of harmful algal blooms with public health and the environment as a function of climate change and modification of landscapes. Tremendous challenge, but tremendously important, at least in some cases, in some places, and sometimes. I mentioned one of the big challenges is, chemical consumption and waste. Recently, some colleagues have actually called for a United Nations type body on chemicals and waste. We know that this has been included relatively recently in the last decade in United Nations Global Environment Outlook types of exercises. Chemical production is going up around the world, and chemical consumption is increasing in many places faster than we can implement systems or technologies to protect public health and the environment. One of the other common themes that we see throughout the Global Horizon Scanning Project are things like green chemistry and engineering and sustainable chemistry. Things like sustainable molecular design, designing molecules that are inherently less hazardous but maintain their intended functions. Next month, my colleague, longtime collaborator, Professor Julie Zimmerman, will give an ACS Science Talk. It's the 26th of March on designing a green chemistry future. I encourage you to check out her presentation as someone who's come up with these principles of green engineering. And we see these types of themes, again, solution-based approaches throughout the Global Horizon Scanning Project around the world, from the science and the engineering to the management and to the decision-making, life cycle assessment, integration with risk assessment, and risk-benefit analyses. So opportunities for innovation to design a more sustainable planet, to facilitate economic development while protecting public health and the environment. There are tremendous opportunities to start realizing some of those sustainable development goals, which again are noble goals, but are challenged by pollution, by resource inefficiencies, and by perhaps management opportunities to be more efficient and effective and more equitable around the world. So just some of the work that we've worked on together, including with Professor Zimmerman and other colleagues. If you're interested in the Global Horizon Scanning Project, 5 of the papers have been published from Europe, Latin America, North America. Oceania, and more Central Asia. I hope to be able to expand this work to focus specifically on India, and hope to be able to engage you in these topics in the coming months and years. You know, we see the connections with environmental quality, with human health, and with ecosystems. But then that's the science part of maybe the Science and Science lecture that I'm mentioning today. In the last few minutes, what I'd also like to chat about is thinking about people that are working in the field, really in the practice. Well, oftentimes environmental health professionals must be involved in so many different activities. I think about one of my former students that's working in rural Alaska for the Public Health Service and works with rural communities. The challenges that they face with the different access to resources, whether that be improved water supplies or healthcare, are very different than what we might see in other locations. But here are just some environmental health headlines from your country and from mine. Vector-borne diseases. Legionnaire's disease, Legionella, is increasing in the United States. One of the most common issues associated with waterborne disease outbreaks. Harmful algae. We have disasters that are increasing. Cyclones in your part of the world, the hurricanes tend to be getting stronger and impactful in the United States. Water, food, vectors, recreational activities, emergency response are often the types of topics that environmental health professionals must engage routinely as part of their jobs. And so in the United States, we really started thinking about these colleagues and what are some of the research and practice-based needs that they experience. Well, much like our motivation for the Global Horizon Scanning Project, remember, we don't always think together. We don't have forums to facilitate that dialogue as often as perhaps we could, to be able to really leverage our collective capacity to be able to identify paths that benefit us all. And so we took a very similar approach with environmental health professionals working in health departments in the United States, because we know that environmental health issues from water and food safety, vector control, or the response after a cyclone, these are profoundly local issues. They affect local communities where you live, where I live. The United States environmental health professionals are the second largest part of the public health workforce. But oftentimes they're considered a silent or even an invisible profession until a problem happens. These are the same colleagues right now that we know are critically involved in the coronavirus response, that are working in the communities to implement those public health practices to try to protect our families, our friends, our neighbors. Unfortunately, even though it's such a large and important part of the public health workforce, really the challenges and the status of the workforce was largely understood. And it's been described as fractured in the United States because there are different systems within and among states, tribes, and territories of the USA. I suspect this is the case in many places around the world. But we know that if we can effectively deliver the 10 essential environmental public health services, the core functions of public health we see here: assessment, policy development, and assurance. If we can deliver these 10 essential services, this is outlined by our Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in the United States, that we can actually protect the health of local communities. And so we launched with our CDC and the National Environmental Health Association, really the largest organization for environmental health practitioners in the US, a project called Uncover EH. And really Uncover EH, or Understanding Needs, Challenges, Opportunities, Vision, and Emerging Roles in Environmental Health, was an unprecedented initiative in the United States, but actually at the global level. If you're interested in Uncover EH, all the materials, outputs, including virtual abstracts summarizing our findings reported thus far, can be found on the Center for Disease Control and Prevention's website here. I want to just summarize some of the findings from two of the papers that have come from Uncover EH. This manuscript appeared last year in the American Journal of Public Health, and it really identifies needs to advance the profession and the workforce. So what does the workforce need? We know that there's an ever-changing landscape for environmental health. On one hand, clean water, safe food, healthy homes, vector control. These issues don't change through time. They're always important. Yet there's always a new challenge that tends to come to public health, and oftentimes environmental health professionals are on the forefront of engaging those challenges. Here's a quote from an article in the same journal in 1942. It actually captures our current state in the United States. And I would argue, as someone who works on 6 continents right now, actively in research, it also captures what's going on in many other regions. Existing challenges, but now new modern problems are emerging. In fact, in this article, there are 29 priority problem statements that were identified by environmental health practitioners across the United States. Again, a very inclusive approach where we received input from over 1,700 people in health departments. And then we have synthesis workshops to distill the information and identify these common themes. So I would encourage you, again, all of these articles are open access from the Global Horizon Scanning Project and Uncover EH for you to freely read and download. Another article that appeared in the journal called Environmental Health Perspectives focused on some of the practice challenges and research needs in health departments of the United States. And also were 29 priority problem statements for common environmental health programs. So the previous article by my colleague Justin Girding and others focuses on really what people need to do their work, okay, to really advance the profession in the workforce. We would submit that although this is done in the United States, there are tremendous international implications and opportunities, as well as our observations here for common environmental health programs, which we report in a different publication as part of Uncover EH. Again, all materials are found here at the bottom at the CDC's website. I want to follow or finish this presentation by just reviewing some of the key recommendations. I'm an academic, I'm an educator. Training is important. We have to prepare the workforce to be able to meet the needs. Professional credentials can be useful. Continuing education can be valuable to assure the preparedness of the workforce. And strategic national training programs are oftentimes exceptionally valuable to engage professionals after they've been in the workforce. We also recommend expansion of non-traditional partnerships. We need to think together within the community. We need to think about who our community partners are. Oftentimes we may not be even engaging others that could be very influential in helping us to deliver services or engage a new research topic. We also recommended developing joint leadership programs where people from multiple disciplines learn how to work together and lead interdisciplinary teams to engage some of the complex challenges facing environmental health. We also suggest translational science partnerships. Developing the basic science is important. Translating that science into the communities to protect public health is necessary. For research, we think that strategic research investment and initiatives are important. In the United States, we've already seen some of the recommendations from Uncover EH be picked up and put forward for funding, similar to what we've seen in different locations around the world for the Global Horizon Scanning Project. And we also see the importance of integrating public health within other disciplines. Unfortunately, sometimes we still tend to work with people in our individual spaces of expertise. That's who we know, that's who we work with all the time. Yet the interdisciplinary teams and sometimes translational benefits are profound when we actually work together. I want to thank you for your today. I'm grateful for the opportunity, not really to speak about the type of research that we do in terms of what you might consider traditional environmental science and environmental health research, but I think it is important for us to think more about the science of science, because when we do so, we're seeing impacts of initiatives like Uncover EH that's already filling important gaps. It's describing what people are doing and how their work is changing, and it's helping to identify perhaps where we should be going. It certainly has supported federal agency strategic investment to start addressing these needs. And Uncover EH is currently being expanded to examine other geographic regions. When we think together, we have an opportunity to identify challenges that matter to us all, regardless of disciplines and borders, regardless of sectors and preferences. All we have on this planet are each other and our collective experiences and capacities. And so thank you again for coming to the presentation. I look forward to some question and answers and thinking with you as we go forward. I do hope that as we go forward, you'll also keep in mind environmental science and technology letters. And if you have any questions about the journal, please feel free to visit our website. Obviously, ACS has what I consider the best resources in the world for authors in terms of how to develop high quality papers, reviewer labs on how to become a better reviewer. So please contact us if any questions come up. And again, thank you for your time today.